If you want to know what sports PTs start but don't finish, you have to tune into this episode. Uh, Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know what sports PTs start but don't finish, you have to tune into this episode. Before I go on to the podcast, what is new with life? What is better? My wife, my queen, she turned 21 again, is what I say. We had a great party with friends, and it was just good to see everybody. It warms my wife's heart and cup. It fills her cup whenever she has very close people around. She loves to like serve and entertain. Like that's her jam. So it was great to see her in her moment, in her light this weekend. So that's the highlight of the week for me. That's really been the biggest thing. The kids are doing great. Jacob, it looks like a big boy now with his haircut. It's still hard to getting used to. My son Zach, those of you know, I am working on developing his ability to be independent, and it comes with challenges, pushes, and pulls. For those of you who have kids, you can understand where I'm coming from in that anytime that you're working with a patient or an athlete, that's a relationship. Anytime you're with your partner, it's a patient, that's a relationship as well. And kids are you want to be logical with them, but they're kind of capped at what they can process, and so you're trying to create independence for them, and he is pushing back at every moment. Everything I'm teaching him, he's using it against me for negotiation and sales, and just his ability to get what he wants. And so that's been a fun time. But other than that, my daughter's doing great, loving ballet at the moment, so that's been great. But all right, on to this podcast. What are we talking about? What is the thing that sports PTs start but don't finish? Let me tell you why I have this episode. Um, I think that there is a gap that sports physical therapists have and we want, but we just don't know how to get there. And this comes off of conversations with my mentorship group and having talks about like why is it so important to off of the topic that we're gonna have today is why is it so important to have this education, these skills, why develop these skills that we don't possess yet. And I think that sports PT has a long way to go. I think if you look at what our profession or our special interest groups and all these things, like I think everybody thinks we're doing great. However, I think there's another button or another limit that we can hit as a profession. We just haven't seen it yet. And I've been able to see some incredible experiences in sports PT and professional athletics and helping pro athletes and being in that world. I can see where we can go. But if you've never worked in that, it becomes very difficult to see something that you don't even know exists or is possible. And so I created this podcast today because I want to share with you what your potential can be, what you're starting, but you don't even finish because you don't even see the light. And this is going to give you an opportunity to truly understand what your capacity is truly as a sports PT. So let me share. All right. So for those of you who've been around, I have a bell curve for sports PTs, meaning if you look at a bell curve, the majority or 80% of the population will fit inside of a bell curve with any given stat, whatever you're talking about. And in sports PT, in the middle of the bell curve is sports rehab, right? Everybody knows how to do it. Instagram will tell you the exercises, blah, 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 right? You go to every CU course, that's what you go for. And then on the left-hand side of the bell curve is 10%, which is acute injury management. If you're an athletic trainer, you already have a foundation in that. If you've done a sports residency, you've maybe had some foundation in there, depending on the type of residency you did. And for the rest of the population of sports PTs who didn't do a residency or not an athletic trainer, you kind of have this gap of how do I manage something acutely? And I've done several podcasts and I have a course on that called my accelerator. Now, on the other side of that bell curve is 10%, which is strength and conditioning and injury prevention. And some people say, well, I have my CSCS. So I have my athletic training degree and I have a CSCS. That's what people will say. Well, that doesn't mean you can use it. It just means that you have the base level of like foundational skills. You just don't know how to implement it and have the clinical reasoning to develop that. And Those who don't have the CSCS or have a CSCS but don't even know how to use it, it's almost worthless, right? It's just a credential that you're not really using. So when you're navigating that entire bell curve in your clinical profession, you will typically hone in on the thing that you want or like you need for that time, which is more exercises, more manual therapy techniques, because you're inside the middle of the bell curve, which is 4 weeks to 16 weeks of care. That's what you're good at. But what I'm saying is there is a untapped potential of what sports PTs can do with on the right side of that bell curve, which is injury prevention and strength conditioning. And if you can understand that, you can deliver a higher level of service for longer. Meaning, I'm not saying get people out of pain and not discharge them. I'm saying you can offer a whole different service, a whole different opportunity, um, which is not personal training. It's not athletic performance. You can call it whatever you want, but it gives us a potential to help a consumer, help the community do more. But the challenge is, and you have everything in your state, like laws and everything else, where you can help somebody at a higher level than just pain management. I think pain management is only the beginning of somebody's journey. So this comes off of a something I posted on Instagram, and if you're on my newsletter, I shared it as well. I showed a resistance training pyramid, which is pretty standard. You look it up, resistance training pyramid. It's not mine, it's just been around. And it's the foundational 5 pillars of how to get an athlete from off season to peak performance. And there's 5 layers. And the first one is neuromuscular control, which is phase one. I think PTs do great at this. I think we're fantastic. It's what we go to school for. We can do the mobility, we can do the control, blah, 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 real like perfect hips, blah, just get everything nice and great. You get the mobility there, ankles are great, hips are great. So that's the first part, which is neuromuscular control, like which can include mobility, flexibility. Basically, it's off-season training, or yeah, off-season training, where you're just called general preparation. Just get the body ready. We are fantastic at that. The next phase after that is muscular endurance. Like once you got a moving great, you're going to create this base layer of muscular endurance where their body has to be able to handle high reps with low load. And that's what PTs do, right? We're the absolute best. 12 to 15 repetitions, 57 exercises, build their endurance over time. But they're moving great, and now they have endurance, right? 12 to 15 repetitions. Okay. That's phase two. And each phase is around 4 to 6 weeks if in an ideal world. So if an athlete is off season, you would start this, 4 or 5 months out, 4 months out. You would start with 4 weeks of a neuromuscular control phase where you're working on mobility, flexibility, good movement patterns. Then it's going to take you another 4 to 6 weeks to work on muscular endurance, which is your 12 to 15 repetitions. Now that they can move better, now you're going to show them how they can move with a little bit of load with longer repetitions. That's perfect. So I told you there's 5 phases inside this resistance training pyramid, and PTs are really good at phase one and phase two, right? So what happens typically in a clinic when an athlete says, I need to go back to sport. I want to get strong again. So a physical therapist will say, no problem, we'll get you moving better, right? Right. That's what our profession tells us, right? We're gonna move them better. We're gonna more flexible, more mobile, so they can like do the things they love. Well, that's only phase one. And then you kind of get them strong, right? You're like, I'll add a little bit of load onto you. I'll give you a stronger band. I'll put like 5 more pounds inside the TheraX machine that you have in your clinic. Now that builds muscular endurance. You've spent a couple weeks on neuromuscular control and you went to muscular endurance. Well, here's the problem. Most PTs will be like, wow, you're moving great and you're getting stronger. Now you're ready to go back to sport. Here's the problem with that. You're actually causing or you're increasing the risk of re-injury and you're doing a disservice to that patient or an athlete in front of you. People are like, wait, why? Because you only started the process and you missed the last 3 phases. The next 3 phases, let me explain. Once you built neuromuscular control, once you built muscular endurance on that, Now you get them, you move them on to hypertrophy. Now they can last. Let's build those things up nice and thick and strong and start reducing the actual reps and start working in hypertrophy mode. Now that might be 8 to 10 reps, but your tempo is going to change. That's the biggest difference. For us, we don't really look at tempo unless you're doing a post-op. I'm talking about non-operative atraumatic pain. So do you ever work on hypertrophy with a non-operative person? Well, why not? It would be the next progression for what you're doing. So you do neuromuscular control, you do muscular endurance, and you work on hypertrophy. You've taught the body how to move. You have a base layer of strength. Now get it strong, thick, and as resilient as possible. Then you do that for 4 to 6 weeks. After you've made it strong, thick, and powerful, or and resistant to stress, now you're going to build strength. The difference between hypertrophy and strength is a whole different ballgame. Volume is just being able to build muscle size over time, right? Your reps are going to be 8 to 10 reps. With strength, we're going to drop that down and actually increase the load. So you might be only be literally 5, 6 reps, 5 to 8 reps on strength. Think about this. You went from muscular endurance at 15 to 10 at hypertrophy to 8 on strength. So as you come down further and further, and for most people, if you're in the strength conditioning world, 5 is going to be enough. That's where really people build the most amount of strength. For some, hypertrophy at 8 is going to work very well. And ultimately, these are all small things you have to consider. However, the principle, the most important thing for you to understand is you're building neuromuscular control to build a foundation for muscular endurance, to build a foundation for hypertrophy, then to build a foundation for strength. At 5 repetitions, that's going to be your cap. So now you have to figure out, okay, how many sets? Well, they're not going to be able to sustain that for long. So you might be at 3 sets at 5 reps, 3 by 5s. And at hypertrophy, they'll be able to do longer or higher volume. So you can probably have 4 or 5 sets at 8 to 10 reps. And my point to saying this is if you can see this ladder, this pyramid building up over time, you can now understand there's so much more of a potential that you can be doing for your patients and athletes that you can help them further. You're doing them a disservice by cutting them off early. Now work on hypertrophy, work on the strength, do 4 to 6 weeks in that process. And then what do you do after strength? Now you have this huge fundamental base layer of foundation of strength, mobility, endurance, hypertrophy underneath them. Now you build power. Now they can move fast. Now they can get into plyometrics, all the fun, sexy things that you love that you see on YouTube, or you see on Instagram, that you see on Google. Those are the fun things, but those you don't get permission to do those until you set the foundation. That's why people get hurt in plyos. That's why they get hurt doing your fancy exercises because they weren't ready. Yes, you built neuromuscular control. They moved great. They did endurance. And then you skipped 2 foundational components and phases and went straight to plyos. And if that, you have too much of a high volume in plyos. Plyos should be literally 30 reps in a single session. 30 reps, 30 reps, meaning every rep counts as one. So if you're doing box jumps, that's one. You only need 30 max in a given session. I don't want to go too far in the weeds. You're going to get me fired up over here. But what I'm telling you is you need to understand that by going from neuromuscular control and muscular endurance, which every PT on the planet does, and going straight to plyos, you're skipping phases and you're putting the athletes at risk. So when I titled this podcast, What Do PTs Start But Don't Finish? You start the process to get an athlete back to sport, but you don't know how to finish them. You stop at phase 2 typically, and you're putting them at risk for re-injury. And if that sounds like you have to make a change. You're doing them a disservice by only doing the normal phases within PT. You're only doing PT phases to get back to sport. There's 3 more that you can excel at and truly help an athlete get to that point where they're like, wow, I'm bigger, better, faster, stronger, more resilient, more mobile. I move better. I'm doing it all. Now, normally in the professional world, this takes like 5 or 6 staff to be able to like get this done right because the caliber, like the precise precision of this. And you're talking about the NBA, you're talking about the NFL. I mean, there's multiple people on the staff to look at like, is this person peaking? Are they at the most, critical times? In your community, that would be you. That would be you. Think about being able to put in, going from rehab, going literally from pain and progressing then to performance. Now that fancy term a lot of people use, most people can't even understand what that really means to get to performance. Most people just do neuromuscular control, they do endurance, and they skip hypertrophy and strength and go straight to power. Well, now you have a very flexible, mobile, soft, small athlete who is, has a little bit of power in them. But if you think about this, power is just force over time. And if you look at your ability to produce force, which is strength, if you can have a block of strength in there, that's already going to increase your power output. But by putting somebody back into sport too soon, you're skipping the strength phase, true strength phase, 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets. You skip that for a 4 to 6 week block, you've already reduced their potential for power output because power is force over time. If you don't maximize force, you're relying on their speed to generate power. You're putting an untapped athlete back to sport, and that's a disservice. And it's something that you have every power. You can do it. You can generate. You can build the skill set to do this, and it's an untapped market for most sport PTs. They just put them right back into sport and think I did a good job. Most people think like, oh my gosh, I got them out of pain and I returned to the sport fast. No, don't let them go. Build more resilience. Give them a chance. Or if you have them off season, or if you get them postseason, they're like, hey, I really want to do it better next year. What do? You're like, well, find a good trainer, find somebody else, work with somebody. But why can't that be you? Why can't that be you? Why can't that be somebody who's really like who just loves what they do and is really passionate about helping somebody? The gap that exists is your ability to actually put it down on paper and help somebody and confidently say this is the thing that's going to do it. That's the thing you're afraid of. You're like, I don't want to commit because I'm not sure even confident about myself. That's where most PTs get stuck. So all you do is start the process to get them to sport. You don't finish it. It's untapped. You're putting them back too soon. You're putting them at risk. It's a disservice. Stop doing it now. I'm very passionate about this because I've seen it done in pro sports. I've seen it, it works. People are more resilient. They have a longer lifespan within their careers. And when they go to PTs who are in an ortho clinic who don't know how to do this, they just they like get their mobility fast and they're like, oh, I did this real cool manual trick and got them pain free. It doesn't fix the problem that they're still weak, that they still can't manage the stress that is required by the sport. That's what you're doing. You're skipping the step that requires them to build resistance against stress, which is strength, which is the ability for them to adapt and be ready for their sport. And if you skip those phases, you're putting a soft, great mover into sport. And any strength and conditioning coach will tell you this. There's two types of strength coaches. One that's like they love movement, they really wanted to see them like move perfectly, and the other one who's a load and go strength coach who's like, I don't care, just get them strong because I need them resistance to stress so they don't get hurt. Now there's a balance of the two, and I think that's where PTs can live. Like we know movement, we can understand load, but what we don't get is progressive overload at a really like fundamental level. So if we can develop that skill, you now have two skills where you can have an athlete and beautifully blend it. So don't use the term rehab to performance if it doesn't make sense for you. If it really you're skipping those phases, it's not the transition point. You're basically skipping. It's from rehab to sport. Performance is inside that, getting them into that. And the performance side for most people is phases 3, 4, and 5, which is hypertrophy, strength, and power. So if you're skipping hypertrophy, strength, and power, you're going from rehab to play. Performance is really those 3 phases, and that's what you really understand. So what are you starting? The rehab side. What are you not finishing? The performance side. So what do sports PTs start but don't finish? Rehab, and they don't start performance, because they're skipping phases 3 through 5. So that's what I want to share with you. If you're fired up like me, I love this stuff. If you're fired up like me, I think the best thing for you to do is look at strength conditioning, do whatever you want. But I think the hardest part is being able to put into practice, right? Most people study for the CSCS, they try and do it. What's the solution? Honestly, you can do the CSCS. I have no problem with that. I think you can do a personal training certification, whatever it is. But I think the best thing for most sports PTs to do is work on a program or something that actually consolidates and tailors it to sports PTs, and that's what really what I've created. And for me, my passion is being able to get sports PTs to a level that didn't even know existed. And that's why I started that with, understanding the bell curve. I think you're missing the 10% on the right side of the bell curve. And if you can get that, it puts you at an advantage to be able to help athletes at a whole new level. Think about all the athletes that you've discharged or got rid of that you're like, oh, now I can see it. I could have totally got you a different place. You can build injury prevention programs, you can build strength and conditioning programs, resilience program, whatever you want to call it. It gives you an ability to help more people. And that's what it comes down to. That's what we're obsessed about, just helping more people. So if that's for you and you really want to do it, I've had a lot of people asking. I do have my strength and conditioning summit. Whenever you listen to this, this is in 2023, excuse me, in April. And I'm hosting my strength and conditioning summit on June 10th through 11th, and that's virtual. And or if you want to come in person, that's great. But I think the primary focus right now is virtual because so many people have asked for that option. So I have a virtual pass, and it's just your ability to learn about it. If you can't attend the whole thing, you'll be able to watch the live recordings at a later time. I know people have lives, jobs, have soccer games and stuff with their kids, and I want to be able to accommodate that. And that's why I built it as a virtual pass. So you guys have that opportunity. But ultimately, it's a strength and conditioning summit for sports physical therapists to tailor it into rehab, talking about end stage, either post-surgical or atraumatic pain or postseason or off-season, generating programs for your respective communities on like, what do I do? How do I offer this to my community? How do I offer it in-house? What are the things I'm missing? Ultimately, it'll give you more confidence. It'll save you time from designing home exercise programs and wasting times on exercises that don't even matter. Your parameters have to be the best. Your outline has to start from the beginning. I think that sports PTs are just wasting time and energy and frustration and taking all this onus of the responsibility of somebody getting better on them when the strength conditioning program will offset that and be able to help that person. So if you're in this world of I only do rehab to play, that's different than rehab to performance. And if that's for you, you need to be in my strength and conditioning summit. If you guys are interested, it's drchrisgarcia.com/summit. You can find all the details there. It's a 2-day mentorship course and an opportunity for you to enhance your skills. Look at the things that you're not doing, which is what you're not finishing. So if that's for you, I'd love to see you there. We have already PTs, I think, for five or six different states already in there. So I'd love to have you in wherever you are listening from. And I hope you're doing amazing. I'll see you guys on the next episode where I come even more fired up. I don't know what the topic is for next week, but I just want to share this. This really frustrates me that we're not doing it yet, and I want to change the game. And I'd love to have you inside this army. We're about to change the profession. So, all right, guys, I will see you guys on the next episode. All right, take care.